Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 113. Thanks so much for joining me. It's going to be a great show for you, as always. Our special guest tonight is going to be Mark Jarman. He'll be on the line in about 15 minutes, but before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry, and I know you love poetry too because you're here spending your Sunday night with us. So please do make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you click the like button no matter where you're watching this or when. There's something you can click to tell the computers that you enjoy it and other people should watch this content because it is great content. We have a wonderful poet every week that we're sharing, bringing right into your living rooms and pockets. So please do make sure you click the like button and subscribe and share and stuff because algorithms rule the world. And now before we begin, we like to start out with Poet Respond. Unfortunately, today's poet can't be with us. He lives in Singapore. It's Sean Wang, and it's about 9 or 8 a.m. Monday in Singapore right now, and he just went for work, so he can't join us today. But we have this poem, which is very interesting, called Testing. And this is something that I hadn't heard of before. The article here that Sean was writing, let me read his note first. So Sean Wang writes, in Singapore, we are infamous for our vigorous national exams born out of a strict Asian culture that places an emphasis on academic excellence. One of our key exams is the PSLE, taken by students at 12 years old, and holds the power to determine, in essence, the course of their lives. Reading about the recent outcry regarding the difficulty of such exams in the time of a pandemic, it made me reflect on my own personal experience. For me, these exams were the first time I realized that I was in many ways average and unexceptional. I think coming to terms with my inadequacy was one of the first steps I took toward adulthood and a struggle I continue with to this day. And that's what he's talking about here. And here's the article. This is from the Straits Times. I'll show it here if I can get it on screen fast enough. This is from the Straits Times. Speechless. Some parents' kids upset over tough PSLE maths paper. And the article goes on to just talk about the situation where this test, which everybody takes at age 12, it determines which high school you get to go to and then thus which college you get to go to. So it's very influential. And you know, given the stressful times of coronavirus, a lot of students are having trouble with it, and a lot of parents are discussing the ways in which maybe they should be doing things differently, which is kind of going on here in the United States too. I've been thinking a lot lately about how weird school is. Like, it doesn't really make sense the way we do a lot of things. It's very anachronistic. And I don't know, so this is interesting to see. It's always great to look around the world and see other things that aren't in our news here. And so it's a very interesting article and just a wonderful poem by Sean. And I'm going to read it for you now. This is Testing by Sean Wang. Testing. I first learnt about the world in shapes. A ball is a circle, is a sun, is an earth, and a square is a chair, is a window, is a tile. Then I moved to colors. Green for grass, red for fire, blue for water in the sky, white for clouds, and black for the night and its ashes. Then it was words, stringing vowels like a train rumbling through the tracks of my throat, and clean whistles and garbled blares. Letters, the dance of the crayon, and the breath of ink spinning in patterns like a snowflake. But numbers, words which now had no thing, but rather a multitude of things hinging onto its curves like a curious hook, and they could move amongst themselves in a forest of symbols, rustling in deep cover, and emerge a fawn, a doe, a deer. Growing up is learning to say things better. Ever since I was born, I knew I liked strawberries, their sour, sweet buzz, even before I saw its sun pith rising in crimson dawn. My babbles would have been much less convincing. What no one told me is how empty it would be when you had nothing to say, when your inadequacy stares you wide-mouthed and blank white as unanswered question on a test running from your desperate pen. Grief you cannot explain away, the sadness that returns night after night as the sun lowers itself into a hole and the sea reclaims its land. When it was you and your failure in a room face to face, a reflection in a breaking shadow, a deaf God and his silent stars. Now how could I put this into shapes, colors, words, or numbers? How lonely, how devastating, how adult. Once again, that was the poem for this week. That was Sean Wang with Testing, the Sunday poem today. And we also thought we'd go back in time a little bit and look at some old poems. It's one of those days, well, you know what? Maybe not. Mark Jarman's calling us right now. Let's just skip this whole thing. I'm going to go to break really quick because I don't have any guests that could make it today. So I'm going to just take a quick break and call up Mark. And I think he's ready right now. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience as we get connected with Mark Jarman. I'm going to play the other poem that we were talking about a little later in the show. I think during the open lines, I'll play this other poem. I'll keep it up. But I'm really excited to have Mark as a guest. I think I mentioned it last week, but when I was an undergraduate, not really a poet, it was Mark's book on holy sonnets was one of the things that sort of light the fire of poetry for me. I found that just randomly in the stacks in college at the library there. And it was a time where I was sort of looking at religion too and looking at poetry for the first time. And it was just such a wonderful book. And then Questions for Ecclesiastes was so great. I found that later. And so it was one of the poets that turned me on to poetry. Mark Jarman is the author of 11 books of poetry now. The Heronry is his most recent. He has also published 2 books of essays and reviews, and the most recent one is Dailiness, which is just out from Paul Dry Books. Questions for Ecclesiastes won the 1998 Lenore Marshall Prize and was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. Jarman's other awards include a Joseph Henry Jackson Award and fellowships from the National Endowment of the Arts and the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation. 2011, he received the Balcones Poetry Prize for Bonefire's new and selected poems. He's recently retired as Centennial Professor of English at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, where he lives with his wife, the soprano, Amy Jarman. And here he is, Mark Jarman. Hello, Mark.
Hi there.
Hey,
how are you?
I'm great. It's great to have you.
I think we first met in 1999 when I came by. I think I came by the offices in Studio City.
That was 2005. Yeah.
Was that 2005?
Yeah. So 16 years ago.
Alan Fox interviewed me.
Yeah, and I can't remember if we go out to lunch too afterward. I think probably. And,
I don't remember. We may have.
Yeah, but it was great. I think you were coming back for some other event, and it was a perfect arrangement to get to see you.
Yeah.
And that's in issue number 25. If anybody wants to go back and buy that excellent interview. But so how are you doing now, Mark? It's been 16 years,
I'm doing
I guess.
Fine. I'm doing well. As you said, I'm retired. I find it agrees with me very much.
Yeah, I kind of feel a little.
Get up in the morning and do just what I want to do, which is usually write and then read.
Well, do you want to start us out by reading a poem?
Sure. Do you have anything that you'd like me to read? I can. Let me read the poem that is the first poem in my new book, Zeno's Eternity, because
Sure.
this is a kind of a poem that a reader will either go, "Oh yeah," or "Hmm." I found out that the favorite poem of Groucho Marx was 30 Days Hath September, April, June, and November, that he liked it because it gave him information. So I thought I would write such a mnemonic poem, uh, and I called mine Memory Song. So this is the first poem in my book. It's just a little thing. Memory Song. Day after, remembered laughter. Day before, even score. Day of, hand in glove. Day for night, twilight. Night for day, star spray. Day in, day out. Whisper, shout.
Excellent. That's the opening poem, Memory Song,
Yeah.
from Zeno's
Zeno's Eternity.
Zeno's Eternity. And
Yeah.
what is that referring to, Zeno's Eternity?
Well, it's referring to my own take on all of the great paradoxes of Zeno, which are based on the issue of stasis, that no object can move to another point in time because of all of the points it would have to go through. It has to go to each one. He uses the arrow. In one famous illustration, he uses Achilles chasing a hare, in another one. But it's a kind of gloomy paradox, but I'm trying to see it in a more positive way.
Mm-hmm.
That Zeno's eternity is a never-ending present. You were in this place. And that I have a poem called The Arrow Paradox, which is the title poem of the manuscript, which tries to suggest that. But it's also about the experience we've all had in the last year and a half of being locked down in this pandemic reality, in which time seems both to extend endlessly, but also telescope inward to a single point. So a number of the poems are about that. Memory Song is just trying to write a poem that Groucho Marx might like.
And so when's that book coming out? That's from Paul Dry Books too, I think, right? Next year, maybe?
Yeah, I'm hoping it's next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like we were saying on the test call, like the Paul Dry book is just doing amazing work all of a sudden. It seems like every time we turn around, there's another great Paul Dry book coming out.
They are really excellent work in nonfiction and poetry. Nonfiction is his thing. His latest is Rachel Hodis's book of essays. I have it upstairs, called Piece by Piece. The wonderful memoir and essays about poetry and other poets. Rachel Hodis.
Yeah, and your newest book from Paul Dry, which came out last year. I'll put it on screen for everybody. This is a book of essays on poetry. This is Dailiness.
Yeah.
And I had to say, I mean, the package that you sent with the Heronry and Dailiness, it was just such two great books. I loved reading both, and this is one of the best
thank you.
books of essays on poetry I've read in a long time. It reminds me of reading Tony Hoagland back in the when he would be coming out with those books.
Well, he was incomparable, I thought.
Yeah.
And a great loss.
So maybe talk a little bit about the title of this book, Dailiness.
Oh, sure. Well, let me look at the. First of all, the epigraph is for my wife, and it includes a passage from the Psalms: "Cause me to hear thy loving kindness in the morning," and that sense of the day as being this solar unit by which we measure time, and by which we might measure a life of writing, the way I know I certainly do, is at the heart of this. So I have a number of essays, writing as a daily practice. But the poem, for example, or the preface is The Poetry of Daily Life. It's about coming to poetry in some routine fashion, and the fact that routine can lead to adventure. That the daily discovery, or being at your desk daily, is where you can find, and I learned this early on, what we might call inspiration, but you've got to be present for it. And so not everybody works this way. This is the way I work. And one of the stories I tell in Dailiness, in the, I believe the title essay, is a story of returning to a town in Italy where my wife and I lived 40 years ago. And it was up on the Tiber, it was in Umbria, and we would take the bus into Rome once a month to get money at American Express. This is way before ATMs. Mm-hmm. And we noticed that on the bus ride, the same people would board. There was a woman who would be going to business somewhere. These are from little towns along the Tiber on the way between this town in Umbria and Rome. And there would be a man who clearly was a mechanic. He'd get on with some obstreperous piece of machinery. And all of these people knew each other. They seemed to know each other. And we would see them going into Rome. And when we took the bus back, we see them again. And so 10 years later, we came with our two little daughters and spent some time in this town. And we once again took the bus into Rome. And we saw the same people. Mm-hmm. And for them, of course, it was a routine kind of thing. This is what they did all daily. But for us, it was an affirmation, a kind of epiphany. Mm-hmm. So that kind of the excitement or discovery of what you're doing every day, and in my case, trying to write a poem or work on a poem or do something, is what is meant by dailiness. It sounds, it might sound commonplace, but it's more than that, I think.
Yeah, and do you, were you able to write, like how long have you been writing daily or working on poetry every day? Were you able to do that while you were teaching too?
I try to, yeah. No, and it's a matter of taking work out daily, having a span of time every day where you are thinking about your writing, not necessarily starting something, but finishing something or thinking about something. It's just been a habit since I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. I had a great teacher in high school, an English teacher who basically suggested that I had to, if I was going to be a writer, I had to practice, he would say. Mm-hmm. It's not unlike something Ezra Pound once said about the poet and comparing him to the concert pianist. You practiced all the time for the recital. So all of those things have been part of my life, I think, since I was a teenager, maybe since I was about 17.
Yeah, and I just always think about how much that must be shaping just how you encounter the world by thinking about, what you're going to be writing about. And, you're seeing the world through that lens of a poem might be somewhere all the time, just makes you pay so much more attention to the dailiness of life, right?
Well, yeah, it does. But the other problem is, of course, is that when you become ensconced in your study, as I am often, then sometimes you can lose touch. Mm-hmm. And what's been nice about being retired is that I can spend part of every day going out into the world. I mean, my wife is still teaching, so I do the household stuff, which means going out into the world, seeing people, doing things like that. So I think that's really important. I think any writer would tell you that, wouldn't you? You know that you cannot be a monk.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's hear another poem. What do you want to read next?
Okay. Well, let me read a poem about LA. This is the third poem in my book. It's a little longer, if I may. It's about, we were in Los Angeles in December 2016. and we stayed there for a few weeks. So one of our daughters lives in LA, and we spent Christmas out there. And I was reading Marcus Aurelius and trying to absorb, assimilate, and I'm sure I'm not alone, the results of the November election. So this is called With Marcus Aurelius in Los Angeles, and it's in a way a love poem for Los Angeles, but also where I grew up, but also a sense of having to understand what looks like, and I think was correct, a cataclysm of American history. So, with Marcus Aurelius in Los Angeles, I have taken a seat in a garden of open sky, hedged with ficus and bougainvillea, the bristling red flowers of bottlebrush, and a couple of lemon and lime trees from one of many forgotten orchards. The December sunlight, mellow and gaudy, leaning west, is slanting in like truth, pushing the winter chill into the shadows. And the truth is, I am sitting nearly paralyzed in an aftermath of despair, having returned to the place I think of as home and expecting the end of the world, our life, our country's life, as I scratch words into the notebook on my lap, where I also balance the book you called to myself. I am here, Marcus Aurelius, with your thoughts, each as stony as a eucalyptus pod and leafy rubble at the base of a tree too grand for this place. Nature always has an end in view, you wrote. My city is the cosmos, you wrote. A mile or so away, a famous boardwalk skirts the gray Pacific, and ragged souls there find a way to eat by selling painted seashells and pebbles. And in the open-air markets, tourists probe racks of T-shirts and hats with palms and clouds. The homeless make their homes on the hard sand, and the languages of the empire ripple past. And even nearer, the same babble of humanity runs along an expensive shopper's street where there is not a single necessary thing for sale. If we accept that one day the sea will cover us or retreat from us completely, abandoning the earth, and that it may be tomorrow or the day after, even as we hear the rumbling surf rise an octave, or note an unusual silence in the silence we are used to, who knows what the sea will do to this city like a sea? The garden shadows are crossing the pages of my notebook while your pages remain sunlit. Nature always has an end in view for us, if not for itself. Our gift is to see that. Our nature is to see and not wholly believe. Marcus Aurelius, philosopher, one of the 5 good emperors of Rome. I won't pretend you were other than a dictator who squandered his reign and after his own soul. A little flesh, a little breath, you wrote, and a reason to rule all that is myself. You lived at the end of a fortunate era, says a historian who loved you, and still urged yourself to rise daily and do the work of a human being, to stop philosophizing about what a good person is and be one. That historian who loved him was Edward Gibbon in the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. He thought there was a period of about 100 years after Christ died of good emperors, the Antonines. Marcus Aurelius was one he mentioned. He called it a fortunate era. One of the most fortunate eras in human civilization, said Mr. Gibbon.
Do you feel like that we're living? I mean, I'm kind of asking about what's about in the poem, but do you feel like we're living at the end of a fortunate era? Would you describe it that way? Like, it does feel so similar to the fall of the Roman Empire, right?
Gosh, I hate to be gloomy.
Yeah.
I can't answer that. I think we all hope that we're not.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe we have lived through worse eras. I mean, you may be old enough. I'm old enough to remember, duck and cover under your desk.
Yeah.
In the 60s, and I used to have nuclear bomb dreams, war dreams, as a child. So uh, I hope not. I
Yeah.
hope we're not at the end of a fortunate era. I hope that this particular era has been an aberration.
Hmm.
Not that it hasn't always been possible.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
that it
Well,
always hasn't been potential.
yeah, that's kind of always the a comfort in a weird way is that sort of everybody, every era of people have thought that they were living in sort of the end of the era, that as
Yeah.
long as
Well,
there's always that apocalyptic strain where we think that this is it.
right.
And it really feels like it every time. I
Yeah.
mean, you had the nuclear fear back then, but then also like the
Yeah.
assassinations of the 60s and,
Right.
and then, but going back to the,
Yeah.
the religion, holy
All
times.
of that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I yeah. My students of the past 20 years understand one landscape in particular, and it's always dystopian
Hmm.
and apocalyptic. You don't, why? You don't want to live in this. I mean, utopia may be foolish and no place, but why the natural inclination to a world of, first described in the Mad Max movies? Why?
Hmm.
Why is this just the natural place you want to go? My sense of the landscape when I was growing up was basically the idyllic landscape of Southern California,
Hmm.
toward which I inclined all the time to go back to that. And this not a bombed out place. Though it was present, even depending on where you were in LA, of course.
Hmm.
I lived on a hill in Southern California, and we could see the riot smoke from Watts in 64, 65 from our house,
Hmm.
looking inland into the basin. So
Yeah.
it depends on how you cherish your own history. Gibbon is in particular interested, though, in a post-Christian world. He had no use for the rise of Christianity. He wanted to find that moment before Christianity took hold
Hmm.
of Roman civilization and history, and he found that period from about 130 AD to 130 AD.
Hmm. Yeah, and that does seem like the parallel for our time right now. It really does. Um, so how much is the dailiness of poetry maybe a rebellion against that, I mean, to me, it seems very spiritual. Reading your poetry always does, and then the dailiness book of essays like puts that really into stark perspective. That it feels that way to you too. Like how much of writing like is a spiritual act for you, and how does it help you process the world?
Um, it is a spiritual act. And I have written about the aspect of the poem as a prayer, but I give it a lot of latitude.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I grew up in a mainstream Protestant denomination. My father's a preacher. My grandfather was too. Um, I had uncles who were preachers. It was in the family. And so, a sense of the way liturgy reached into daily life was something I was familiar with. Um, but I never, when I said about writing, I didn't understand the parallel between that. And I didn't even think about the parallel between that and prayer life. They were separate. But as I've grown older and tried to talk about what it's like to sit down daily and approach the page and try to find some, it, I know this sounds a little too Misto Cosmo because it's so hard. You're pushing your pen across the page. I write by hand, and then I later put manuscripts on the typewriter or now on the screen. It's so much easier to say, well, I think I'll just finish reading the paper. But you compel yourself to do it. I do it because I have so many drafts of things now that are not finished that I
Mm-hmm.
can take out and look at every day. And so a moment comes when you're trying to describe that, I think, and you realize that this is a ritual
Mm-hmm.
and it is a gesture outwards. The poet Brenda Hillman and I were in graduate school together, and both had strong religious backgrounds. And we were talking about prayer once, and she said, it's a gesture outwards. And I thought, I still think that's a wonderful description, because writing is so often a gesture inwards so that you can go out and give it to a reader. And I'm always, when I write for a reader. I may be writing for myself, and but I'm also eventually hoping that a reader will engage with this. Mm-hmm. Is it a form of resistance? Oh, it certainly is. It certainly is. It's a way of saying, I do this, and I'm going to set time aside for myself to do this. And I'm engaged with this thing that's important to me, but also is an ancient thing to do. Mm-hmm. I was talking to my youngest daughter, who's a very brainy person, and I said, we were talking about this, and I said, I don't know why I'm never satisfied. I'm never satisfied. She said, because you grew up in a capitalist society. You're constantly supposed to be doing more and advancing and making more. This is from someone who writes for television. Yeah. Nevertheless, mm-hmm. She had a strong point. It's an interesting point. I always thought it was a way of detaching from any sort of society and what it demands of you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's an interesting kind of criticism, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. But there's something really, like when you call poetry a spiritual act, there's something really deeply true about that, it seems to me, that goes back, it's sort of like the deepest, most ancient thing that we do. It goes back to the idea of the logos and naming creation into being itself. Yeah. And I don't know, I was talking to James Pennebaker, the psychologist for the winter mm-hmm. issue, and he was talking about just the way that even naming like a condition that you have psychologically, or something that's traumatic as trauma, and knowing what to call it gives you psychological relief. And there's just such a power to naming that just dates back so far into history. Like it's sort of what's the foundation of all of civilization or something, is the ability to name things.
I think for the author of the Gospel of John, let's call him John. He had a good foundation in Greek philosophy, perhaps Platonic, maybe even pre-Socratic. But when he says it is logos, that's exactly what it is. There's a sense in which the word is related to coming to consciousness, and mm-hmm. you want to give names to these aspects of your consciousness that you have suddenly become aware of and that you value. I think that very strongly about that. I think this is one of the things even in Freud's interpretation of dreams. One of the things that's happening is things you do not understand, we are now going to give them names. Mm-hmm. And the revelation may be incorrect if we've, the way we've come to think about Freud, but nevertheless, the impulse, the desire to name the world around you, and of course, by doing that, control it in some way, I think is really is one of the impulses for poetry. It is also one of the impulses for prayer.
Yeah.
But what I think is really important about that impulse for prayer, and I like what I've always been compelled by what Samuel Johnson said about prayer. Prayer should not be novel. It should not be innovative. It is very intimate. We shouldn't even think of it as poetry in any way. Mm-hmm. And I think what that does is that it gives you a great deal of latitude. Think about it this way. I sit down to write. What do I expect of myself? Just to sit down and write. And I think it not being novel, not being clever, or any of that. So I at first, for a long time, I was mad at Samuel Johnson, but then I finally thought, no, that is a way of liberating yourself. You're still trying to figure out something, but you're not demanding that you write Paradise Lost this morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a little anecdote. I can't remember who it was, but in the essay, where I think a writer's wife, they said, did he write all day? And it was, yeah, he wrote all day. And what did he write? Nothing.
Yeah.
And that's just a great way to think about it, though. Like, we're processing all these things even if we're
Yeah.
not writing too. It's a mental
Yeah.
space that we're trying to kind
Yeah.
of chase, where you can actually create.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
That's actually a Ray Carver story.
Is that Ray Carver? Okay.
There's a character named Myers,
Uh-huh.
and his wife tells these friends, Myers writes a little bit every day. And the friend says, that's impressive. What did you write today? Nothing, Myers said.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about this in more detail, but let's do another poem so we make sure we get to a good number. What do you want to do next?
Can I read something a little more upbeat than
sure,
than what I just read? So the first section of my this book is a number of poems in which there's some iconic figure at the heart of it. And this poem is called The Dancing Satyr, and it's about a statue that was dredged up from the Mediterranean earlier in the 20th century. Piece by piece, this is the amazing thing. It came from about a depth of almost 2,000 feet, and different pieces of the same statue came up in a fisherman's net. And today, at a place called Mazzara del Vallo, I believe in Sicily, it has its own museum. It's called the Dancing Satyr. And I think you'll recognize the form. I have been dancing 2,000 feet deep, dancing too for as many years, a figure of ecstasy, rapture of the deep. I sent up a limb in a fisherman's net, then toiled the same way up to join it. I have been dancing 2,000 feet deep. Frozen from birth in my bronze flesh, I was born to dance and be motionless, born into ecstasy, and the rapture is deep. I sank with head thrown back, spine bowed, with mother of pearl in my unclosed eyes. I have been dancing 2,000 feet deep. And those members I have parted from, right leg, arcing tail, both arms, still figure in ecstasy, wrapped in the deep. Whether on the seafloor in the dark or bathed in lights in my own museum, still I am dancing centuries deep, a rapture of bronze and ecstatic sleep.
Yeah, excellent. That was the Dancing Satyr.
Yeah. I was with an archaeologist when we looked at this, and she said, "This is the future of archaeology. It's on the seafloor."
Mm-hmm.
But I also thought this issue of the thing in motion and yet in stasis, and achieving the kind of ecstasy in that rapture, is one of the things that I'm trying to talk about in Dailiness and also in these poems. To me, it was a figure of the poem or of the poet. And it all comes together piece by piece. And it's a villanelle. I've been played loose with it, but it's a villanelle.
Mm-hmm. So the thing that I want to keep going on is you have an excellent chapter on metaphor, or an essay on metaphor in this book. Mm-hmm. And there's something that I've been trying to wrap my head around for so long, but it seems to me in some way that if the creation of meaning is sort of the fundamental human drive, which I think it is, then we do it through language. And it seems like the fundamental way we do it, we can create newness out of language, is through metaphor. Like, there's a weird way that comparing things to each other is sort of the fundamental basis for language itself. Like, a chair is only a chair because it has certain things in common. And we see this, like this chair I'm sitting in, as a metaphor for the chair you're sitting in. And eventually we give it a name, and it's chair. And then we know it's a chair and don't have to pull that meaning out anymore. There's some weird way in which that happens. And so this essay about metaphor was so interesting to me. And just the way you think about it is, there's something about how like a metaphor has to fail to be successful at the same time, which is such an interesting concept. Can you just explain a little bit about how you think about metaphor?
Well, I'm getting part of my inspiration for that thought from Robert Frost, one of his essays. I think it's on extravagance. I mentioned in the essay where he says, to make the final unity, that is the greatest attempt that failed. that metaphor is an attempt to reach that land of likeness that Augustine pictured. We live in a land of unlikeness, but in the land of wholeness, when everything is brought together, we will live in a land of likeness. And Frost is approaching that and saying that's the greatest attempt that failed. And then I started thinking about the fact that any metaphor, like the kind you just mentioned, has to break down at a certain point, because let's say a chair, a metaphor using the word chair might be the outcropping of cliffs above Edinburgh called Arthur's Seat. That's metaphorical for these cliffs that overlook the city of Edinburgh. They're like a chair or a seat or a throne, Arthur's Seat. But there's a place in which they are nothing alike.
Mm-hmm.
You take a little bit from it, you take something from it, and it gets you into a new place. This is perhaps poetry making a new reality with these two things you've brought together. But only in the land of likeness and unity can they come together. Mm-hmm. So to me, the excitement is in a little failure. A little energy is given off. One of the great ways I think this works is, in W.H. Auden's In Memory of W.B. Yeats, he has one stanza or one part where he talks about poetry being a river where executives would never want to tamper. It flows south from matches of isolation and the busy griefs. It flows south, a way of happening, a mouth. Mm-hmm. And you can see this river flowing, like the Thames perhaps, into the sea, where it gives off, it ceases to be itself, but it gives off this moment it speaks in a way. It's a mouth, a river mouth. And I was trying to suggest it's that moment where the metaphor stops being a metaphor. The thing stops being and becomes another thing. Mm-hmm. You've got to move into something else.
Yeah,
it's impossible to articulate. Yeah, but that's what's wonderful about metaphors, mm-hmm. and that's all I was suggesting. The greatest attempt that failed, Robert Frost said. We stopped just there, he said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just something about even that metaphor of the mouth of a river, which we call a mouth, which is so fascinating too. And yeah. And all the fresh water comes out of it. But then there's that spot where it merges with the sea and it becomes salt, right. and there you can even see that, that disconnected place.
Yeah. And that's another thing.
And that's where, like we interviewed a fisherman poet in one issue, and he was talking about how that's the area where the fish just thrive, because that's where the water's churning and mixing, and it's full of food. The Alaskan shelf or whatever they call that, in the Bering Sea. It's just fascinating stuff. There's a question here from Dick Westheimer. Actually, it says not question. As Mark read Ursula Le Guin, she unnames them, about how Eve unnames all creatures. Adam named and created a new world of experience and metaphor rather than names. Do you have any?
I have. But the thing is, they're both dealing with, language and a paradox. But so Adam names the animals and Eve comes up with an anti-language. Mm-hmm. I think it's a wonderful moment. You can play with it. It's one of those kind of moments in the Bible where you are free to interpret. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's kind of, but I don't know what else to say about that. Of course, she would do the opposite. She would unname. Mm-hmm. But they're both are going to need language when they walk out of Eden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even though language exists in Eden, sometimes people, I think, what is it? Meditation at Lagunitas, Robert Hass suggests that language is part of a fallen world, not for Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They had language in a prelapsarian world.
Yeah. So, and even God did too. He says, "Here I am."
Yes, and so it's like, perhaps language is that thing which is related to human consciousness, including the soul. it's the animating principle, or it is, to be metaphorical again, a symptom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's do another poem. I should say, if anybody has any other questions for Mark, leave them in the chat windows on either YouTube or Facebook. I'm watching both of those, not on Twitter because I'm not paying attention there. But leave any questions you have on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll pass them along. But let's hear another poem, Mark.
Okay. I'm going to read something that seems kind of grim at first, but it's like a lot of the poems, it tries to rise above its grimness. The title of this poem is Come Away, which refers to the Shakespeare song, Come Away, Death. And after the massacre, to make love, to lie on the morning paper after the massacre, and after making love, and sing together a song of Shakespeare's, after the horoscopes and the massacre, to express our own defiance and come away from death inoculated for a day of dread, to read the paper and to ask each other what mourning to wear, sitting side by side in bed, gazing into the future, then turning to each other and to nakedness, alive in all likelihood for a long time, more than long enough to make love, to sing after the massacre. That is a sense of the defiance of being engaged with making love or making art. I like this poem. My wife doesn't like it. I do.
And that was Come Away, Come Away.
Little short one. I have a series of short poems in the middle of this book, which actually chart through the pandemic. And here's a poem about my parents. I was born in Kentucky, where my father served a church in Eastern Kentucky. And all of his congregants were farmers. And my parents came away with an expression that they used, as I say, all their lives, a kind of rain that was called a growing rain. Growing rain, term my parents learned in a church of farmers in Eastern Kentucky, the place where I was born, and said the rest of their lives in Scottish mist with a tang of cold smoke and an Oregon overcast. A growing rain, they said, whenever it fell gently and steadily, soaking without beating down, even on Christmas Day, on patchy snow, a growing rain, though mealy, thin, or pointless. Good shoes darkened side by side at the bus stop, woolen coats hung down with water weight, crowding drops bled together on the windshield and reached the pavement. More than enough for all. The surplus of good and evil saturated the daily news and, reaching for it from its cloud on the X-ray, the cancer quietly budded, blossomed. The growing rain kept falling all their lives.
Yeah. And that makes a metaphor out of the phrase they used, which is so interesting.
Yes.
And I wanted to talk more about just how you come up with metaphors. Like in the process of writing, is there a source or a strategy? Because you sort of save them for really good times, and then you deploy great metaphors. It's kind of a hallmark of your writing. Is there a way that you go about finding them, or do they come spontaneously when you're not looking, or how does you come up with metaphor?
What a good question. I don't know if I can answer it. Let me put it this way. It's the moment where you think, for me, oh, I'm onto something here. Mm-hmm. The word, something's emerging from this, and I'm going to see if I can follow it. I have a poem in here, it's too long to read, about an experience. Again, it's kind of, these are all, in one way or another, the whole section of these have to do with the daily sense of being encased by this hostile mystery, perhaps, or threat. And it's simply about a period where every night we could hear right outside the window of our house, of our bedroom, something breathing, a creature, perhaps. I tend to think it may have been a deer or even something larger, coyote, sleeping there. But it went on for a while one winter, and then it stopped. And I thought, well, this is simply a phenomenon. But once inside of the pandemic, I thought that sense of the world breathing at your window and it being a kind of mystery. What could it be? Is it actually a person who's found shelter out next to our house? We live on a hillside, and bedrooms on the second floor. Anyway, was that it? And that's when I realized that the phenomenon which I had written about and recorded and heard might become a metaphor for this other thing. That's the one that comes to mind. But usually there's something, it has to emerge, or the poem doesn't get written, or it's not, or the poem gets written and it's not worth repeating to someone else, unless that coming together occurs and you catch it. There was a wonderful essay by Denise Levertov, which is included in the great anthology Naked Poetry. She calls it the X Factor. So it's like you travel over this space and land on the other side. And she said, and that is bliss. And it's that factor that allows you to do that in a poem.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot lately about it being a function of the bifurcated brain, and sort of the holistic, nonverbal way that the right brain sees the world, sort of translated into a language that the left brain that we're more conscious of verbally can understand. And so it feels to me like the process of metaphor must be somehow turning off and letting the right brain speak a little bit, letting them have the controls a little bit and being free. Like there's a sense of freedom that comes from, it comes out of nowhere. Like people talk about that. So I don't know, there's something to that, I think.
I think there have been periods where whatever that was, that duality has been named for the poets of the New Criticism, the Southern Agrarians, ghosts of Nashville here. It was the source of irony, that conflict of opposites, that fertile conflict of opposites was the source of irony. And that was a defining characteristic of what they felt was the best poetry. But we can speak of it in other ways too.
Yeah.
The problem is, of course, that it's a binary condition. And we know, and I think quite rightly, all things binary are being profoundly questioned. So that even the way we describe metaphor, well, there's A is B, or similarly, A is like B, and there might be, in a sense, too narrow a sense of this process in thinking it in those ways. I know that's been on my mind lately. But in an inarticulate way.
Yeah. There's a way that the whole universe is some kind of like frothing sea of things that are all interconnected. And even in the out in deep space, there's still like atoms popping in and out of existence in this like frothy dark energy, and there's like sort of that dark energy to everything where there's no boundaries between anything.
Yeah.
And sort of metaphor lives there. Like again, like that
metaphor could live there.
Yeah.
But one of the things I think metaphor needs, at least for human beings, and it's also been brought into question by this very thing. And I talk about it in the preface to Dailiness. I was reading something about it's popular physics, that time, especially in, let's say, a stone or a pebble, time doesn't exist. It's an illusion. There's space, but not time. And that's startling to think, right? Space and time were created at the same time. That's the problem, yes, right? Time. And of course, our whole sense of time, and the premise of my book, is measured by, our rotation around the sun, orbiting around the sun. but not in other places,
Mm-hmm.
or even the sense of place or space perhaps is too limiting. But that's that failure, the attempt to describe, let's call it space and time,
Yeah.
almost.
Mm-hmm.
But all the notions of eternity, at least in the in most religions, step outside of space and time.
Mm-hmm.
They don't exist.
Yeah,
Which is
there's
interesting
just a way that poetry and all these kind of thoughts like live on the edge of something, and it's why it's fun to talk about it, but you can never really get a sense of it. But let's hear another poem. What do you want to do next?
Okay, well then, I was going to read a poem about my neighborhood, but instead I'm going to read there are a few poems about the Passion in here, and I'm going to read this one. No one understood the final meal. No one understood the final meal, that it was final, each part with a meaning. No one understood as it was served, each portion of the body poured, doled out. Strange flesh, strange drink, each portion of his body. And as they ate and drank, he talked, even had a private conversation. All they remembered was eating with their friend, a meal they'd had so many times and known the order of. What was the order? But who can remember dinner yesterday? Forgiven for a crime not yet committed, enjoying to remember some not yet lost, they tried to bring them back, the taste and texture, somehow, the meal, him. I'm going to read a poem that kind of goes with it. It's called Blackout Good Friday Night. And my notion that grief, really unutterable grief, lasts much longer than the 3 days his disciples were without Jesus. But that's Blackout Good Friday Night. And this is also, the occasion was one Good Friday a few years ago. We had a blackout on Good Friday night. We lost all of our power. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. This is just too perfect. Blackout Good Friday night, wind and sizzling dusk, crackling and draining, no light. Saplings lopped off, old trees toppled on the ragged mandala of their roots. The friends of Jesus in their grief pit had no idea that they were only waiting. The dawn was rising underfoot. Living by candlelight, cursing the darkness, we are not lost, but only waiting. Already fast asleep when the lights come back on blazing. I was just thinking of that moment. You lose your power at night. You think, I just go to bed. And then in the middle of the night, all the lights come back on.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. That's a way to think about that.
So, you're most known probably for being a new formalist. And so can you talk a little about
I'm an old formalist now, my friend.
Old formalist. But it's still, I mean, you read a Villanelle and it still informs the lines. You can hear it in the beat, in the sort of there's a surety of the rhythm of people who have written in formal poetry. Can you talk a little bit about the role that played for you? Like, why were you drawn to that in the first place? And then why are you sort of playing around at the edges of it now? Because the poem in the current issue, I should say, in Rattle 73 is a prose poem, which was kind of shocking to see from you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I published a book of prose poems based on the New Testament epistles, called Epistles, back in 2007. And they were an attempt, after years of writing in form, to get away from that, to get away from that line, the iambic line, to get away from the sonnet form. Although a critic took the very first prose poem in that book and showed how it had a sonnet structure. And once, when I was giving a reading to some very smart, intelligent young poets and saying I'm trying to get away from the iambic pentameter line, one of them said afterwards, I heard a lot of iambic pentameter lines in that poem. But the prose poem that you did called, and maybe, should I read it and then talk a little bit?
Sure, I could pull it up
I've
here.
got it right here. It's new. Um, the prose poems I'm working on right now are a bunch of them, mostly about trying to think of, pat phrases or important aspects of traditional spirituality. And one of the pat phrases is, confession is good for the soul, right? And this is not wrong, but so I was trying to think about that. And I was trying to write it in a little paragraph form. I think the prose poem is the one space in which, there are no rules, except that you've got to convince someone that they've read a poem in prose. And James Tate has a wonderful little prose poem about this. Well, I'm not reading a poem here. It's okay. I'm reading prose. So this is good for the soul. Confession is good for the soul. And suffering is good as long as it ends. So is waiting. Toys, bread, and circuses are good. Alfresco meals with lovemaking afterwards, very good. Huge, hangar-sized quiet is good, but only on paper, only there. Autobahns where fast, blinking cars blare you aside are good, very good for the soul once you're out of the way. Brinks and thresholds, balancing a dwindling glass for another's thirst, these are good for the soul. And a night so dark and clear you can read by starlight is more than good. What else is good for the soul? Another soul coming close. Another figment believing the stubborn illusion of time is good. And every atom listening within a pebble where there is no time. Yes, no time. That will be good for the soul, like a long vacation. The entire void outside of space and time, where the soul is going when it retires, that will be good. So, is everything good for the soul? Yes, everything and nothing. One of the things that interests me that a poem can do, and sometimes it does it at its own expense, is to find that phrase that is undeniable. I mean, Robert Frost said, all we want to do is write a few things the world can't deny. But that phrase that is undeniable. So as I wrote this, when I came to, yes, no time, that will be good for the soul, like a long vacation, I thought, well, I could stop there. In fact, I kind of like that. The sense of vacation, vacating, emptying. But I thought, no, I haven't said, I want to get to a point that is more absolute and undeniable, even though in a way it might seem glib. So I went on. So is everything good for the soul? Yes, everything and nothing. Everything is good for the soul, and nothing is good for the soul too. That's what interests me about these little prose poems. I'm trying to get to that moment. Like poetry itself, any poetry, I got to include information, things. My grandfather was in the Navy during World War II, and he once told me about a night in the Pacific. He was actually in the Marines, and he was eventually stationed on Saipan. When it was so dark and clear, he could read by the starlight. He could see the moon was not up, but there was enough light in the sky that he felt as if he could see by it, and that it cast a shadow on the deck. I mean, I can only imagine. But so I got that in. That's the thing that's nice about prose. I guess if you're writing a poem, you can bring on all of these other things.
So what makes it a poem? Like what? It feels like the repetition is the key for, at least for this poem. There's that.
For me, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it is. And when I'm in the prose poems, I have written like the epistles. It's all about repetition. Finding a metaphor or several, the way St. Paul does. Basically, he invents the way we're going to think about faith as a suit of armor, for example. He has these martial imagery. Put on the armor of faith, put on the breastplate of salvation, these sorts of things. And you think about, he's got the whole Hebraic tradition to draw on, but he has to make up something new, a new way to think about what it means to believe, to preach Christ crucified. So he is just working very hard metaphorically, to find metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
The most famous one being in Corinthians 13, 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. Love is,
Mm-hmm.
well, yeah, I should know that by heart, so shame on me. Shakespeare retakes it as love is not, love does not alter. He deals with that too. So what am I? I've got myself wound in a ball. In the letters of Paul, he uses metaphor to help the early Christians think about what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
That's a practical use of metaphorical language. That's what I find challenging in prose poems too.
Yeah, there's a way that the repetition sort of drives the rhythm of the poem, and there's a chapter in the Dailiness about the use of repetition in poetry too, which is something that I've always, we do these critiques of the week every Friday, and when sometimes repetition really works, and sometimes it doesn't. And there's a way that like it only works if it's like shifting meaning a little bit. It can't be a flat. But how does repetition work, and how does it not? It's hard to articulate what the difference is, but you can sort of feel when it's working and when it isn't.
You can. So I'm looking at this essay, the story of a feeling, and in the Gospel of St. Matthew, I say Jesus warns his disciples not to use vain repetitions when they pray, thinking they will be heard for much speaking. But he goes on to teach them the most repeated prayer in Christian liturgy, which is the Our Father. So we want variation in ritual, song, and sex sometimes. At other times, faced with reality that may be more than we can bear, we want the same old song. At the end of Waiting for Godot, Vladimir, struggling to put on his boots and facing another spell of waiting, declares, habit is a great deadener. So like all repeated modes of being and artifice, habit beguiles the time until the Messiah comes.
Interesting.
But sometimes habit is stale and trite. We seem to enjoy repetition, but we don't want too much of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a
but
weird
we
line
need it
to
sometimes.
find. Yeah. It's weird. It almost works like a catalyst. Like it either makes it more dead or more alive, depending on how it's deployed, or depending on what's behind it or something.
Yeah. The whole notion of practice, if you're learning a musical instrument, could be thought of as training muscle memory. You have to do this again and again and again until you don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you learned, I know this sounds so banal, but I learned touch typing in high school, my freshman year, and it has always served me well, except that until I had to learn to type on a computer keyboard, without having a return and all. Anyway,
I lost my train of thought. I was going to ask you about one more thing. What was it? Oh yeah, I was just going to say, you never really explained what it was that just drew you to formal poetry in the first place.
Oh yes, I will tell you.
So there's something that just...
I will tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
When I was learning to write poetry, I kind of schooled myself, apprenticed myself to poets like Richard Wilbur and W.H. Auden. But I came to a point where I realized, well, these guys are just old fogies. I am a great admirer of Alicia Stallings, who was on your show a while back. And I know that she was lucky in her classical training not to take any creative writing, but I did in college. And writing in form just was not cool.
Yeah,
you didn't do that. You didn't write in meter and rhyme. I wrote a poem about surfing in meter and rhyme, and I was laughed out of the class. And I thought, oh my gosh, we've got to change this. So I would say my first several books, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, are in kind of mainstream American free verse, which is perfectly fine. I learned it from Elizabeth Bishop, who more or less wrote it. Robert Lowell eventually would write that. Williams. But when I came to write the poems in Questions for Ecclesiastes, and I thought I really have got to find some way to identify this thing that has always identified me, even if I've denied it, which is faith.
Mm-hmm.
I have to do it, and this sounds counterintuitive. I have to keep myself honest and not be sentimental. And so I thought I need the discipline of form. So I returned to the sonnet. I tried to learn how to write good blank verse. I'd done these before, but not thinking about it,
Mm-hmm.
not thinking about them as disciplines. And so I did, and I thought, well, this feels right.
Yeah.
And I continue. I'm not as, what's the word? I'm a little more heterodox than a lot of my fellow formalists.
Uh-huh.
And I get, don't sometimes. But I always find thinking of the rhythm of the line as it comes from a traditional meter and the form of the poem as it conforms to some traditional form, whether it's in poetry or liturgically or something like that. These I find productive and helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more conscious of what I'm setting about doing than I was before then. And I'm glad that I am.
And you mentioned that it was uncool, and I had as an undergraduate, before I was even, it was one of my first experiences with poetry. I had a professor who said, like, "Thou shalt not rhyme."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and why does it become so why is it uncool? Like why do you think that happened? What is the driving force
I don't know
behind that?
what happened. I think I don't know, but it's like the sonnet itself comes and goes.
Mm-hmm.
It went through a whole century. The 18th century, which just kind of went underground. And they came slowly back. And then in the beginning of the 20th century, Williams called it a fascist form. So meter and rhyme has a kind of a political connotation attached to it. When the new formalism began to come about, there were critics, I shall not name them, who suggested that this was like Reaganism and the return to the right. And most of the formalists I knew were to the left of me
Mm-hmm.
politically. So
Yeah.
this happens. It gets polarized. No one is helped by that polarization.
Mm-hmm.
That includes the polarization between language, postmodern poetry, and whatever it might be mainstream.
Yeah.
This is not helpful to understand each other if we are going to understand each other.
I wonder.
But this is common.
Yeah, it had never really occurred to me, but I wonder if any of it was actually like the influence of like anti-Soviet propaganda. Because there's the whole Cultural Congress thing, and they had a lot to do with the founding of the Iowa Writers Workshop. That whole, the abstract impressionist painters and things like that were funded by sort of money through via the Cultural Congress and the CIA and things. I wonder if that has anything to do with that.
I don't think it does. I think it simply has to do with the fluctuations and movements of the way art has changed.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you think do you think that poetry would have more of a prominent place in culture if the formal poetry had remained at the forefront? Because the people who don't read poetry regularly and haven't been through MFA programs in colleges and things like that usually say, this doesn't even rhyme if you hand them a poem. We just had a reading at our coffee shop in town, and somebody said to me, "This is cool, but none of it rhymes." And I don't know. Is there something?
I mean, it depends the way people listen. People their ears are filled with rhyming verse, and in the form of popular song.
Mm-hmm.
And the most recent, hip hop is all Anglo-Saxon tetrameter.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a pleasure that we get pleasure from these things, and the attachment of political values or to them, it does not help, because then you can't hear things anymore. You can't take pleasure in them. You can't take pleasure. If you think rhyming is wrong, then if you listen to a reading by a brilliant poet like Alicia Stallings, you're going to miss some of the pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
That's like saying Mozart is wrong. Only 12-tone music is right. That's modern. Then you think, okay, then you don't get to enjoy Cosi fan tutte. Too bad for you. So my sense is, again, a lot of latitude, a lot of variety.
Mm-hmm.
Let 1,000 flowers bloom.
Yeah. Let's finish up with one last poem, Mark. What do you want to close with?
All right. Well, I'll close with a prose poem, which is called "In Closing, Let Me Say."
And where can I find that? Is there somewhere I can find
Oh,
it?
you don't have it.
Oh, I don't. Okay.
I got it. It was in a magazine called Miramar, and I only say it's kind of confusing. Let me read something that's not so gnomic. I'll read this poem. My father died about 4 years ago, and shortly after he died, an enormous Luna moth appeared on our back door. And this is as traditional as I can be. It rhymes. It's in quatrains. I think you'll hear it. My father returns as a Luna moth. My father returns as a Luna moth, a green hand under the porch light. He comes back as a tree frog on the kitchen window, blown there by the storm overnight. My father returns as a red wasp, and the venom she sticks in my knee. He sleeps in a paper capsule of the nest under the eave. And back he comes as a file of old letters, angry, commonplace, merry, and grim, airmail flimsy, stationary stiff, from him to me to him. He returns as hymn tunes and cufflinks, a diamond pinky ring that won't fit. He looks out as the passage from Micah engraved on his columbarium niche. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly. He's there in a kiss with sealed lips. He's reborn as the O-gape of his last breath in the solar eclipse. One day his signs and wonders may no longer make me think twice. Will he ever stop returning? Not in my life.
Yeah, beautiful poem. That was My Father Returns as a Luna Moth, one of the last poems in the forthcoming book. Mark, thanks so much for being a guest. It's just a pleasure talking to you and hearing your wonderful poems read
Thanks very much.
for us in the audience. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, have a good night.
You too.
Bye. Yes, that was Mark Jarman, and his most recent book that you can buy, which I highly recommend, once again, is Dailiness here. And oops, let me get this. Here we go. Dailiness, Essays on Poetry. There's a wonderful essay, too. We didn't mention it, but there's a great one on revision in that daily process, where he goes through different revisions of his poem, Eocene Beach Leaf. And you can see that the radical ways that it changed over time, even a correction from The Atlantic, which was fascinating to see. Can I show you that? I lost it. I don't know where it is. But you can see all the little notes that he made over time to this poem here. Like one of my favorite books is Black Lightning. There's a great anthology that goes through well-known poems with the notes over time like this. And so you see that go from a long draft into a shorter poem. Just one of the many great essays in Dailiness. The Heronry is his, I don't know where I put that. The Heronry is his most recent book of poems. It's still out right now. And then, once again, the book that we were talking about is A Zeno's Eternity. The Dailiness and Zeno's Eternity are going to be from Paul Dry Books. And you can find more of Mark Jarman at his website, markjarmanpoetandcritic.com. So do check that out. Just wonderful stuff from Mark. And so glad we could have him as a guest today. Now we're going to move on to the open lines. The prompt for this week was to write a poem without using articles, which is a, an, or the. So we'll see if you did that. You can also share Poet Respond poems You can also share whatever you'd like. If you'd published something recently that you're proud of, you can send me a link. Here are the details on how to do that. What you do is email the poem right now to OpenMic, that's openmic@rattle.com. Then pick one or the other, call in over Skype or call in over the phone. Skype is Rattle Poetry. Just type that into the chat window, say hello, and I will call you back when it's your turn. And the phone, just call up 818-850-7727. That's 818-850-7727. Just let it ring a few times, then hang up, and then I'll call you back within the next hour. That is how the open lines work. And we're going to go to a quick break. I'm going to stretch, get this stuff prepared, and we will get to your poems. So I'll be back in just a minute. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. People ask, do I really stand up and stretch? The answer is yes, I do. This show's going to go for 2.5 hours. It's a long time to be sitting in one position. So I do log into my OpenMic at rattle.com email account to get your poems and stretch a little bit because I like to stand up. So let's go to Megan's prompt poem. So once again, the prompt was this right here. The prompt was... Get rid of Mark. The prompt was to write a poem without using articles, a, an, or the. That is the prompt poem. And Megan's poem here is this, driving by my daughter's middle school. So here it is, driving by my daughter's middle school. I look up, crows everywhere, black ink splattering, blue canvas. Let her be okay. I tell concrete buildings, chain link fences, signs that read, choose kindness. 6th grade, she explained to me, sour candy on her tongue, is dog, eat dog. I believe you, I say, remembering swim class, 12 years old. What my bully said as she sneered at my unshaven legs, you are disgusting. How I rushed home, asked my mom to teach me about razors. Groups of crows are called murders. But crows look innocuous in flight, until they spot roadkill below, until they swoop to feast on something that never knew what hit it. And then it's Megan's poem, a wonderful one, again in no articles. I don't know how she does it. I don't know how you do it either. So that was the prompt poem for this week. That was Megan's Driving by My Daughter's Middle School. And let's see what you have. And let me try to fix the lighting here too. This is the time of year where I deal with the changing sunlight conditions because it's full sunlight when the show starts, and it is darker when it gets just gradually darker during the show. I should probably close the windows and get like really bright lights, but I don't like bright lights in my eyes. Anyway, let's see. We have a whole bunch of people lined up. There's a great group of people. So we have Nivedita, we have Angela Gartner, Dick Westheimer, Philip Stern, Carla Schwartz, Carlin Codd, Julian Matthews. We have a 372 number. We have T.R. Powelson, Guy Chambers, Mike Bales. That 327 again. So we better get to that. So let's get to some open mic. A 636 is calling right now. So first I'm going to call somebody that is used to it. So I can tell you, when I call, it's going to startle you because it comes from the future, like 30 seconds. You're going to be listening to the last poem, and then bam, the phone's going to ring or the Skype's going to ring. Then answer it, but turn off your stream that you're listening to it because I'm 30 seconds in the future. There's a delay. Otherwise, there's two Tims talking to you at the same time, and it gets very confusing. Also, have the poem ready to read in front of you because you can't read it off the screen. It's that 30-second delay again. You're not at the spot where you're reading the poem, so it doesn't really work. You have to read your own copy of the poem. So let's call up Angela Gartner first, and then we'll go to Carolyn Codd, I think, after that. Hey, Angela, how you doing tonight?
Good. You did startle me coming from the future.
yeah, there's just no way around it. I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, we could. I've thought about going over to Zoom, but I don't really like Zoom for the format. And there's certain things that I don't like that don't work as well. So we're sticking with Skype. But what do you?
It's good, actually. So I like it. This is the only time I use Skype, actually, which is funny.
Yeah, the thing is that when we started doing the show, nobody used anything really. And now, then Skype was just the thing. And then now everybody uses Zoom, but it doesn't really work as well for this broadcasting software. So what do you want to read, though, tonight, Angela?
Well, I don't know, like, am I allowed to read two, or am I only get one tonight?
Let's see. Let's keep it to probably one tonight. I think we have a good number of callers.
Okay. So I have The Clock or The Foul-Mouthed Companions. The Foul-Mouthed Companions is kind of fun, so let's just read that.
Okay, sure. So what is the backstory or whatever for this?
Well, this was from, oh my gosh, it was actually from a poet's response. And, basically I was just like thinking about, all like the misinformation that kind of goes around. And that's kind of where it kind of stems from. Everything that's kind of going around, I just feel like, everyone's got like, it's so funny. I have to kind of look. It's so funny. Like, where did I get this from? It happened a while ago, but I know it was from. Let me see. What did I do? Like I'm like, what was I? Why was I thinking about this? Oh, okay. It's about like I was just okay. It was actually about there was a banned book. So like. The school district there was like 2 banned books, and it's actually happening in our area as well, near my city. And basically, like these school board, the parents want to remove these 2 books. And looking at the books, it's not what they think it's about. And I just kind of worry. I kind of think about how, nowadays it's like, they're not reading the whole book, so they don't know what's really in the book. And, the books are in a high school library. It's not in a middle school library. And I was just thinking about like how banning, like them going ahead and trying to ban these books, and they don't really understand what it means when they think about banning books. Yeah. And that's what I think. It's just kind of also like, I feel like there's so much misinformation out there. People are just like getting upset like at a whim. And, this kind of thing was just the bird in the poem represents the books and like the misunderstanding. And if you just like delete everything and ban everything, then they're really not going to get that, the site. And that's the guy in the poem, the one that, the poet that I kind of quote in the beginning. He actually, he's Russian, and basically he wrote a poem about the Holocaust, and he was mad that the Russians kind of didn't get involved. So,
okay. Yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the true what his quote was. And I kind of replace, that's, it kind of started this fictional scenario of this bird. So.
Okay. Well, here we go. Let's hear it.
The Foul-Mouthed Companions. The truth is replaced by silence, and silence is a lie. Poet Eugenie Ionesco in an open letter to the New York Times, February 1974. I knew some friends who had a talking bird. They taught him to say all the dirty words. Sit, scream. We would laugh and drink, tell him to say it again. Shit, it screamed. The red wine splashed out of our lips. We praised and cooed at its mimics. One night, another couple brought their son. The colorful bird was sitting on its swing. Shit, it screamed. We gasped and covered the child's ears. The bird looked at us and waited for our cheers. On our next visit, the winged companion was gone. They told us they would no longer have parrots. Our friend's son, confused, asked for the bird, who spoke the word he's heard from his parents.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a cool poem. Thanks for the foul-mouthed companions. And it's something that I think about all the time because there are about, I don't know, 24 high school libraries, maybe more, that subscribe to Rattle. And I just always think, like, one of these days, someone's going to pull out a poem and say, what is this that's being, in our library? And then I'll be all over, like, Fox News or whatever. Because we have all sorts of things in Rattle. And for high school kids, they can engage with the world and stuff. But I don't know. I could see people getting upset sometimes. Every time I send a new subscription, I'm thinking, I don't know if you're going to get in trouble. But okay.
Well, and sometimes people don't understand it's just words. There's things that we say in private that and things that we say that we don't like. It's just words. And there's things we say in private and with our friends, and there's also things that we say in writing. But it's not like everyone's going around and saying all these words and these things. And it's just, I feel like, a lot of things are just getting overblown. Like, we should start to have kids understand what these things are rather than just, there's some things that we say, with our friends, and there's some things we don't say with others, it's like, but, instead we just want to ban everything and cover their ears, and instead of actually making them understand why we sometimes use these words. And it's just words. It's not like
squiggles on a page. Yeah.
And I mean, there's reasons that sometimes we use those words but it's, it's kind of the appropriateness of them. And sometimes those words are appropriate, but I mean, the story was about Fairfax, but in our district, not in our district, but a district that is in my area, there was this book, and there was like 642 writing prompts, and there was probably some inappropriate writing prompts in there, but it was a college level course, and all the kids weren't using those prompts. And then, now parents are upset. It's like, what are we getting upset about? Like, can't we tell them why maybe these prompts aren't good? But the kids weren't using them anyway. So, it's the same thing with these books. The authors, they try to explain that, it's in the context, and it is, and, they're book club winners, and they were banning them. But the people who are complaining didn't really read them.
Yeah.
So,
anyway. anything for political, field goal or whatever. Anyway, thanks so much, Angela. It's always great talking to you.
Okay, sorry to take time.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thanks for bringing up that topic and a good poem. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Good night.
You too. Bye.
So Angela Gardner with, I lost the poem title, but it was a poem about censorship with the S word in it. And let's call up Carolyn Todd next. Carolyn wanted to be on last week, so I want to make sure we get to Carolyn. Let's see. And she has a prompt poem from last week. Last week's was to write an ode to autumn. So wanted to make sure we definitely get to Carolyn. Then we'll do some of the first-time caller numbers after this. Let's see. Well, we'll try over the phone. Let's see if Carolyn answers. Well, Carolyn's not answering, so we will try circling back there later. We have a bunch of first-time callers, so I'm going to hit some of those next. We have a 372 that'll do right now. Then we have a 636 and a 917. Those will be the next three people I call up. So let's see who we've got. Okay, let's try Rick Christensen then. That's a 636. Trying to find Rick's poem.
Hello.
Hey, Rick, this is Tim with Rattle. You are live on the air. How you doing tonight?
I am great.
Turn off that stream in your background. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it.
No problem.
Okay.
So first
and
of all,
I had sent my poem.
Yeah, I have it right here. First of all, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from St. Louis, Missouri.
Excellent. I'll make sure I put you in the phone book as soon as we hang up. And what do you have that you'd like to share tonight?
This is my ghazal called Kaddish. Interestingly, I wrote this as an assignment for my forms workshop with Maria Nazos. Celine Frost, who you published 2 weeks ago for Sestina, is in our same class. And so when I wrote this, Maria was like, well, this is good. Why don't you send this to Tim also? And then, of course, tonight with Mark Jarman on, I was just, he's a god in formalism. And I've gone over into formalism now because I wanted to sort of restructure my poetic voice, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then I sent this out to you guys this past week because we recently had a news story about Illinois, which is right next door to St. Louis, across the river, and they just passed a milestone of 25,000 losses to COVID. And I just decided to write my ghazal for the week, call it Kaddish, and talk about what a Kaddish would be for our world today.
Yeah, very good topic for a poem, and great forum too. It's really cool. You have a formal poetry workshop. I love that.
Yeah, we're having a great time with it, and you published Celine a couple of weeks ago. We've got some talented people in there, and some beautiful work is coming out.
Excellent. Well, let's hear this Kaddish. I have it on screen. Go ahead whenever you are ready.
Okay, Kaddish. The 10 old men sit side by side, comparing death. Say, we grow warm. The planet now is sharing death. Say, with each new storm and flood, the wounds grow deeper, while neighbors turn their heads away, just daring death. No masks, no shots, the death toll just keeps rising. So these men know there's no point to try despairing death. They make their peace in any soil that they find and know there is no stake in us forswearing death. The 10 old men begin to chant their Kaddish now, lament to face a stern and quite uncaring death. They sing to all the things that we are losing now, a song of faith that brings us to unerring death. The old men call to bees and to the buffalo. They chant for all the things that will be wearing death. The content of old men's hearts inform their prayers. They try to guard themselves from known impending death. They wish for all and pray for each. Escape from death. Pray, add my name to chanting for lamenting death.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that was an excellent ghazal. And I should say it was one of the ones that I was closely considering this week. It was a really good one. The only thing that, I like to try to mix news stories and things. And there was this one about the testing, which no one had, written about. But it was a very good one. So thanks for sharing that. I'm glad you could call in, Rick.
Well, thank you. And I love the program and I love the magazine.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I hope you can call in and share poems coming up in the future.
Count on it. Take care.
Excellent. Thanks. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Yes, that was Rick Christensen. Let's add Rick to our phone book really quick so we know who he is next time. And we have, let's call this, there we go. Let's call this 737 number, or no, 372 number again. Let's see. That's weird. So whoever's at 372, I keep, you keep calling me and I keep calling you with no answer. So, let's see. Well, we'll circle back to you again. We'll try again. If you call while I'm in the middle of between guests, I'll just answer next time. So I don't know if the ringer's off or what's going on. But let us call instead this 917. Hey, yeah, this is Tim with Rattle. You are live on the air. Who am I talking to?
This is Pam Wax. Hi.
Hey, Pam. So glad you could call in. And you sent a poem that is recently published in Solstice magazine, it says.
Yes, correct.
Excellent. I think I hear myself in the background. Do you want to mute that?
I will.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so tell us about this. This is Approaching Zeal, a run-on Abecedarian. Or do you say Abecedarian? I guess I've always said
Abecedarian, I think.
Yeah, okay.
I think you hear the C, yeah.
So yeah, tell us about this.
Yeah, do you know Natalie Diaz is Abecedarian?
I do.
She wrote one called Abecedarian, or maybe you're right, maybe it is Abecedarian, requiring further examination of Anglican seraphim subjugation of a wild Indian reservation. And it was a wild ride of a poem, and really new for me to think about putting pen to paper and creating my own. I learned this particular poem with Jessica Greenbaum in a class I took with her, and just decided to try one out. And unlike many of the poems I write, it basically came out in one fell swoop. And then I was very excited that it was picked up.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, an abecedarian, I'm gonna from now on soften the C because I think I never actually looked at the word until just now. But so an abecedarian is a poem that each line, each first letter of each line goes through the alphabet. So there will be 26 lines in this poem, and they go from A through Z. And then there's a double abecedarian too, which is you do the opposite up the last letters too. And so it's a form. I'm not sure who invented or where it came from, but this is what we've got here.
Yeah, and it's a run-on in that I went beyond the Z for the A, B, C, D again at the end. Yeah. So, and really the basis of it is a spiritual practice of cultivating character. So in there, the fact that zeal is in the title, the fact that the first word of the poem is alacrity, and then there's joy. These are all virtues and then zeal, obviously, getting to Z is all part of this practice of cultivating character.
Oh, very cool. Well, let's hear this. Go ahead whenever you're ready. It's up for everybody to see.
Great. Approaching Zeal, a run-on abecedarian. Alacrity, not my middle name, boldly lays siege, item by item, to a miasmic to-do catalog approaching Zeal. That's someone else's doppelganger, not mine. I'm more easygoing, except when I'm not. A laissez-faire, drop by whenever, give what you can kind of gal, listless. However you slice it, whatever its name, I gave up on musts and have-tos just after my brother jumped from a bridge, knocking us from fixed latitudes and longitudes like so many pickup sticks or dominoes, cascading nihilistically toward a place our eyes are still adjusting to 3 years later. Perhaps it's relevant that my middle name, quixotically, is joy, claimed, lost, now reclaimed anew, a virtue so mismatched to my guilt that I gathered it stick by fucking plastic-colored stick until it resembled a structure, vulnerable but still standing, a cairn, wobbling ever so slightly at the crossroads of a trailhead, aching to dance. You can choose this route or that, blazing in possibility, open to the winds, amid parting seas and timbrels, or battle your brother at the Jabbok, circa the rest of your God-given days. I choose both shores.
Oh, powerful poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Pam. And that was Approaching Zeal, a run-on Abacadarian, which you can find in Solstice, a magazine of diverse voices at solsticelitmag.org. Do you know anything about this magazine? I'm not familiar with it. Is there anything you can share about it?
I don't know that much about it, but it was a contest issue that Tim Siebels was actually the contest judge for.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how often they do a contest.
Interesting. Yeah, so it's an online lit magazine.
Yeah,
you can subscribe. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. It was a really, really strong poem. I appreciate it, Pam.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye. Yeah, so once again, that was Pamela Wax. Uh-oh. Let me sign back into my... This happens every week. I always forget. Okay. So we are back in. Let's see. Let's go to Zachary Honeycutt. We haven't had him in a while.
I always forget.
Hey, Zachary, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Tim?
I'm great. It's always great to hear from you. And sorry, I saw your note. You missed. You meant to read this last week, but you missed the time change. It was last minute. It was like 6 days before we had to move up the show in time. But so this was an ode to autumn, I assume.
Yes, I'm very excited to read it. I was really bummed out last week because, I was getting ready for the show like right before 8 o'clock, and then I was like, oh, crap. Yeah, I missed it.
Yeah,
but,
sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. It's not your fault. But, this is a satire of a Florida autumn.
A Florida autumn.
It's kind of like sarcastic. I think when I read it, you'll see what I mean about it being a satire. I kind of like took what Keats was talking about, and I just changed some of the words around. And like the last stanza is the exact same rhyme structure as the stanza from his Ode to Autumn, just with
perfect.
different words.
Well, this should be fun. And I think actually, weirdly, last week it didn't really feel like autumn here. And now it completely feels like the leaves are all falling on my face. I got to rake them, and I take the dog for a walk at night, and it's freezing. So it's going to be fun to hear this to a Florida man, or to a Florida autumn.
That's how it is here. It's like I'm in Florida, so it's the whole point of my poem was that the season like starts to change, but then it can't make up its mind. Well, it doesn't like go full out like in New York or somewhere where it's colder. So
yeah, well, let's hear it. I have it up for everybody right now.
All right. To a Florida autumn. Is it not the hour when time hurries back? I'm not sure. I don't think he knows either. Seldom I feel him plotting with the sun and hear soft evidence of things he's done. It's that time of year, the shorebirds don't say, 'cause they're not in the swamp. He is neither. And youthful students in the night of day stare at screens whether or not light declines early. No plowing done when the sun shines, nor hard labor of hand, but of the mind, and slight cool air does not move their kind. The season can't pick a side of the fence to harvest its fruit, but like the ghost of a fuller autumn I heard of whence, I longed and dreamed to experience the most. He's not the boy that belly flops head first into the water, but he dips his toe. A ghost of a specter, imitation of the turning leaves and mock wind, as if his hotter father doth rescind his life. Why does the season bother go? If not all out, then why the frustration? Where are the large falling leaves? Maybe they forgot to fall. Masked children aren't playing in their mounds. Where is improving decay? Can't he decide if he's coming, staying? I still see the Frankenstein gourds, pumpkins orange with health and pumpkins hurting, speckled firm gourds among pasture hay and straw, grown by work-worn yokels and country bumpkins. But the season is fickle like flirting younger women, and the leaf-lax skirting is as barren a molding I ever saw.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing. That was a fun poem. That was To a
Yeah,
Florida
no problem.
Autumn.
And okay, so this, can I read this? This is a ghazal that I wrote about the
Gotta
fall.
save it for next time because we got a 1-poem limit tonight. There's a lot of people on the call list, but
Oh yeah, okay, no
but
problem.
I won't
really...
archive this. Just next time, call in next week and we'll share the other, maybe the other 2 next week. You might have time.
All right, really quick, Tim. I just wanted to let you know I just got published again by Warp 10.
Oh,
I got
cool.
a short story published, so whenever you want, just check it out. It's called The End of August, and for anyone watching, check out The End of August on Warp 10 Lit Magazine. It's a really cool sci-fi journal. They had another writer publish something about the Wizard of Oz and how there's these robots in the Wizard of Oz and in like modern literature in the past 100 years. And it's just a really interesting journal. So if you get a chance, check it out.
Very cool. We will. Warp 10. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, that was Zachary Honeycutt with some fall poetry. And check out Warp 10 too. I think he it's a science fiction oriented or literary magazine. We talked about it one time, maybe 6 months ago or so. I have no idea which episode that was, but check it out. Let's see. Who should we do? Let's. We haven't had T.R. Paulson. I'm trying to go through instead of just in the order because we have a lot of people. So I'm going in the order of people who haven't been on recently or at all before. We'll do them first, and then we'll get to the regulars more later. So here's T.R. Paulson. T.R. hasn't been on in a while, and not sure what she wanted to share. Hey, T.R., how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. And here you come in. Hello. Let me get you resized. So, what did you want to share today?
I'm a little bit overwhelmed right now in rejections from journals and having a lover's quarrel with a new poem I'm working on. I wanted to build my self-confidence by revisiting a published poem.
Oh, that's a good idea. Okay, and this was
I sent you the link to it.
Yeah, I just opened it up. I'll put it on the screen for everybody. This is in J Journal.
Yeah, it's a poem that I wrote in response to the Kavanaugh fiasco when he was being confirmed a few years ago, and you emphatically rejected it, and I did a little more tweaking of it.
Wait a minute. What does it mean if I emphatically inject something?
It's my attempt at weird humor. No.
Okay. So this is in J Journal now, The Devil's Triangle.
Yeah. Here is J Journal. Mm-hmm. It's a really neat journal for poets respond rejects because naturally our first choice is Rattle.
Of course.
But J Journal is great. The editors are very motivated to work with poets. So if they fall in love with potential, they will still accept something and work with. I have a short story in a previous issue, and we emailed back and forth with like 4 different drafts of my short story. That was in 2013, I think 2014, and so they're great. The poem, however, this isn't the version I sent to you. I tweaked it a little bit since then, but they said they wanted this version exactly what it was, so there was no back and forth. But they're really they're very theme oriented as far as justice, and a lot of the Poets Respond poems are justice, about justice, about right and wrong. They're not just looking for, stereotypical like criminal justice type stuff, but all different kinds of justice. Yeah. So I highly recommend it for anybody that wants some place to submit.
Yeah, very cool. And it's jjournal.org. So it's pretty easy to find and remember. jjournal.org.
Yeah. And so I'll go ahead and read the poem.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Devil's Triangle. 3 glasses in a triangle. Brett Kavanaugh. Not that. I see a 3-sided room. One wall, gleams of brimstone, globs of golden yellow, dripping molten beads that slide and run all over. 60 degrees the angle to its fellow, formed by flames hot as passion or a welder's torch, or 60 times as hot. The darkest room in all Gehenna, this ungodly triune's elder guards the gate into this grisly fest of gloom. A line of spinning pitchforks form the stinging sulfur fumes to the wordless tongues that hiss and spit up sparks. A place for torture slinging villains only. A man who forsakes with a kiss. A child slicing ruler. A naked father, a bad guy with a gun. Or do I look and see it's all a lie?
Oh, excellent! I love that. That was the Devil's Triangle, and a sonnet, and it made me think we haven't published a sonnet in a while. Actually, I don't know what. It seemed like sonnets were having like a little time in the sun, and now we're not getting as many. I wonder why.
Well, the poems I'm working on that I'm having a lover's quarrel with are a series of sonnets that I hope to surprise you with in January as a chapbook.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
At this pace, it'll be 5 Januaries from now.
Well, good luck with that, TR. Always great talking to you and sharing this poem.
Yeah, good talking
Thanks.
to you too.
Yep. Good night.
Night.
It was TR Paulson with The Devil's Triangle from J Journal. So thanks for sharing that, TR. Let's see. I'm going to do one last try. This is my last attempt at the 372. We'll see if we can get. Oh, it's ringing this time. Did it ring last time? I don't remember. Nope, still unavailable. Okay. So, that was the 37. Oh, wait, there's 2 372 numbers. Well, now I'm even more confused. Let's go to... Let's wait, actually. There's... That is very strange. So the 372 number, whoever it is, every time they call, it's a different... like the area code's the same, and then the exchange is the same. The last 4 digits are different, so it must be some kind of weird, like calling through, slinging through somewhere. But let's call up Julian Matthews. Let's call up Julian Matthews, and we get Phil Stern. We got Nivedita. Let's see, we have Richard Westheimer's here. Guy Chambers. We have Mike Bales. So I'm trying to get to... I think we can get to... If we just stick to one poem, I think we can get to everybody. So let's go call up Julian. I'm not sure what time it is where he is. Oh, a very small poem from Julian. Well, it's not connecting. I'm just going to read Julian's poem form, I think, because it is small. But let's read this. It looks like a good one. We'll just move on, but I'll read this poem right now. This is Lonely Poem by Julian Matthews, a small, he says a small prompt poem. And this is the prompt, which is a tough one. Not a lot of people have done it so far. The prompt, once again, was to write a poem with no articles. So here is Julian Matthews' Lonely Poem. Iambic pentameters lose feet. Double entendres go single. Every couplet split, puns no more fun, sentences over, grammar Mars, spelling off, poems don't rhyme alone, I am. Oh, that's very cool. I love the I am at the end. Lonely Poem by Julian Matthews. Thanks so much for sharing that, Julian. Sorry that the connection didn't work. But, it was a short poem, so we got to it anyway. Let's see. So let's go to... Let's call up Nivedita. And then, and Carla Schwartz too. So we have a lot of people. Let's try to cruise through. We'll see what we can get to in the next 20 minutes or so.
Hello.
Hello, Nivi. How you doing today?
Doing great, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing good. Let me get you situated. So last week, I don't know if you noticed on Facebook. I don't know if you watched on Facebook at all, but it was the video of the bears going down the slide that you included. That gave us like, they had a copyright claim on that video. Like somebody owns that video. And so there's a link to like if you go to on Facebook, only Facebook, YouTube didn't flag it, but there's like some link to like I don't know, like storylines or something it was called, some page that they had to insert because they thought we were stealing that video, which is totally fair use and commentary. Anytime you write a poem about something, come on. But anyway, so that was just funny. I was trying to figure out what they were talking about. But so what do you want to share tonight? You have 2 short poems. Maybe we could just do them both if we do them really quick. But what do you want to do?
Anything. One is the prompt poem as usual, and the other is a story poem. Again, about that.
Well, I have Not Worth It up here. So what is Not Worth It? Is that the prompt?
That's the prompt poem.
Okay. Why don't you read that, and then we'll do the other one too, because they're both short.
She speaks in words I cannot comprehend. English is English, yet something is not right. My ears catch sounds, yet my mind is off on its own tangent, not knowing how to process, what to process, and most importantly, why to process, when all it does is bring anger and despondency, sadness and ire. Why waste what precious mental resources are left on such twaddle as this?
Excellent. Not worth it. Totally agree. Good insight. Thanks, Nivedita. And then the other one was about a news story. Oh, Fat Bear Week. I love Fat Bear Week. I think I'm going to not play videos unless they come from like The Guardian or something, which this does. But if no one's ever seen this, Fat Bear Week is so fun. This is something they do at the Kodiak like Wildlife Refuge or something in Alaska. But they take this, they have this bear contest to see who's the fattest bear. And then they show like before and after pictures for how much weight they've gained over the feeding season. And so this bear right here is Otis, who is up to 480 pounds, or did he gain 480?
And this is his first time winning this competition.
Oh, so he's the winner. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's one big bear. But it's really actually fun to do. You can like vote yourself, and then I don't know, and it's fun to watch the videos. And those bears are just fascinating. So let's hear this poem. Anything you want to say about it first?
I think you said everything there is to say.
Okay, well, go ahead, Ray. The Portly Paunchy Patriarch. This is a good one. Okay.
The Portly Paunchy Patriarch. Fall is when the seasons are changing. So up here in Alaska, the bears are preparing, slowly yet surely, for the winter that will soon be here, by packing on the pounds to stay warm for half the year. 480 Otis is the clear winner here today. He has put on the most pounds and is putting on more to this day. For as we conferred on him this title, you can see him, the true champion, chowing down so as to not stay slim.
Excellent. Yeah. So highly recommend that Fat Bear competition. They do it for 1 week. It's like Fat Bear Week, and a fun poem. Thanks for sharing that, Nivi.
Thank you, Dennis. Lovely.
Yep. Always is. Yep. Have a nice day. Bye. So Nivedita Karthik with the Portly Paunchy Patriarch. And let's see. Let's call up Caitlin Bucksbaum. Caitlin hasn't been on since July. So let's call up Caitlin. I don't know if I have the poem yet. Oh, there it is. Oh, no. Caitlin,
Hey, Tim.
hello. How's it going?
Good. There's a weird setting on Skype where it was only showing at the very top of my screen this little bar that said, "You're getting a call." And so I didn't even know you were calling me for a few seconds there. My bad.
No problem. So what is the poem that you wanted to share?
So
and it's
I
good to
think
see
I
you,
was-
by the way. I haven't seen you since July.
Yeah, it has been a while, and so that's why I was like, man, I've been really slowing down on the production front. I've been
I hear you,
busy
me
with
too.
a lot of things.
Uh-huh.
But I wanted to write one for this week, and I just didn't get around to it, and so I was looking real fast, and I found one that I posted to Instagram a month or so ago. I tried to put a link in the chat here for you.
Oh, link in the chat. Okay.
I don't know if you can pull it up. Yeah, because this was like 5 minutes ago that I...
Okay. Let me, there's the chat. There's the link. Okay. And now there it comes. So everything works perfectly. So this is from
Hooray!
Caitlin's Instagram, which is Kate, C-A-I-T, Buxbaum, B-U-X-B-A-U-M. So if you want to follow Caitlin on Instagram, that is where you do it. And this poem is Manic. So what do you want to say about it?
Well, it's not in the normal style that I write. It's a little more experimental, but also I think kind of fitting with the subject matter. And I've never read it aloud. It's just kind of a little thing that I wrote, and I was looking through it and no articles. So,
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's hear it whenever you're ready. Go ahead.
Okay, let me pull it up again. All right, Manic. Spinning out, eyes aglow, breath sharp, love, hate, drive, reckless passion, starved blood. Sure, stymied, day, night, spiraling on fire for futures we crave, peace we deserve. Lost just out of reach.
Wow. No articles. Excellent poem. Manic by Caitlin M.S. Buxbaum. And yeah, I don't know. You wrote a poem spontaneously with no articles. I don't know how you did that, but that's perfect. Thanks, Caitlin.
Magic.
Yeah, it is. Like, see in the future.
Before I run off,
Sure.
I will like to invite people to a reading on Wednesday with an organization called Poetry Bridge on Zoom.
I've heard that somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually been to one of their meetings once before, but there's me and one other guy from the organization that are going to be featured readers on Wednesday, and that starts at 7 p.m. Pacific. I'm pretty sure because it's 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. Alaska. So 7 o'clock Wednesday night Pacific time. People can come listen to me read
Very
more.
cool. You probably put the link on your Instagram or something, right?
I actually don't post a ton of poems and things. I post posters and flyers for events. But yeah, people can message me if they want the link.
Message Caitlin for the link to that Poetry Bridge. Thanks, Caitlin. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Yep. Good night.
Bye.
It was Caitlin Buxbaum with Manic. And now let's go to Guy Chambers. Oh, Guy hasn't been on in a while either. Oops.
Hello?
Hey, Guy. How you doing? I hear myself in the background, so
Not
mute
bad, huh?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, how's it going? I haven't been down there for a while, so.
I know. Yeah, you haven't been on since May. It's like a reunion of sorts. Yeah, thanks for calling in, Guy.
I've been busy. I had a bunch of poems published here to the States and down over in New Zealand. And I've been hosting a poetry show, Poets in the Park up here in Canada. And that's every third Wednesday of the month. And so they wanted me to get that program going. So they got me hosting that. So I've been pretty busy doing stuff. Yeah. So this poem here, I know we had the prompt here, so I found this one poem there. I usually like to get poems, I just get words together or something like that and see what I come up with, and then decide what I'm going to do with it. And I came across this word, Adam's Ale, so this is the poem here. So this is what I came up with for it.
Okay, cool. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Adam's Ale. Far unknown for those of eyes never seen in the seascape. Coral reefs praised with virgin blue angel water. Promise ripples there with raindrops gathering for within life breathing. Dusk dawn, deep drawn, rafters shining off moonlight, caressing endless, fore and after, thereafter and hereafter, breathing winter green, lone avatar Harlequin in Davy Jones' locker, drifting in Adam's ale, entwined with undying, promise with a new dew, magical, rhythmical, blessed, hearted, grace upholding, embracing, into deep blue receding, caressing Adam's ale with the keeper's gift to enlighten eternal Eden in the oarlocks of the raptor's wrath. Thank you.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks for sharing that, Guy.
Yeah, okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, have a good night. That was Adam's Ale. Excellent poem.
Yeah, okay, thanks a lot. Okay, bye.
Bye,
Have a good
Guy.
night.
Yep, you too.
Bye.
That was Guy Chambers with Adam's Ale. And now let's go to Mike Bales. We have Phil Stern, Carla Schwartz, Richard Westheimer still. Yeah, I think that's the run of it. Let's get everybody. Let's go to Philip Stern next, then Carla, then Mike, then Richard. That's the order. Except I already forgot the order. Phil Stern next. Yeah. Okay. Hey, Phil. How you doing? You're live on the air with Rattle.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm doing great. What did you want to share with us tonight?
Okay. First of all, I also live in Florida.
Oh yeah.
And I do have some August poems, but they're not for Florida specifically. And I also missed last Rattlecast with Marissa, so I have two prompts that I tried to work with. I was encouraged by Deborah Kalaji's talk to write my first haikus since I was in high school.
Oh wow. Cool. Well, these are short too, so let's do both. Go ahead and do the. I have two autumn and the haiku up first.
Right. Okay. I approached the two autumn as the season, as Kate suggested, was part of the beauty in all the seasons. So, and I approached it as a life cycle. So I have woman, man, and family. To autumn, your children scattered, husband upstairs napping, warm bread in the oven. To autumn, man, receding hairline, worried walk to the mailbox, late night TV jokes. To autumn, family, moist cornbread stuffing, gatherings of laughter, awaiting FaceTime call. So
yeah, I love that.
Try
So
to end
the autumn version, and I love the last one, the waiting FaceTime call. Great juxtaposition there.
Yeah, I'm new to this, and I'm not sure how much they conform to the style. I know that the Deborah suggested that there was a lot of freedom, but I'm not sure that how well it can be called, haiku.
I think it counts as far as I'm concerned, but these are good. So the other one is the prompt for this week. Correct. No articles. Right. Another haiku. So let's hear this one too.
Okay, this has no articles, but it's also about the topic. Old spy movies. Do Russian hitmen train to eliminate English articles?
that was great. Thanks so much for sharing that. It was old spy movies and then the two autumn sequence. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you for allowing me to.
Yeah,
Bye.
Always a pleasure. Have a good night, Phil.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
So Philip Stern with a little round of haiku. And let's see. Who did I see? See, I say who I'm going to do next in the order, and I lose track of it. But let's call it Mike Bales. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Pretty good. Sundays are always like interesting days. It's like after a big night of karaoke, and I have to glow that. Then each Sunday I wake up and there's a prompt from a blog called Poetic Bloomings. So we've talked about before how as a flagger.
Yeah.
This poem has to do with that. At first, I wrote something and went, geez, how do I write something without articles? But when this idea came about, I knew I could do it. one thing I could say about flagging that I've never really said before, I'm taking in nature and all that.
Yeah.
But if they're like spraying oil on the highway, I imagine it's not good for the grasses right by the highway. Spray oil so the next coat of asphalt sticks. And I think this poem actually has to do with our relationship with highway construction.
Interesting.
So the poem's called Ghosting Broken Highways. With early sun, fading moon, ghosting broken highways, as they beg another coat, yellow lights flash, silent awakenings, morning stilled, barricades rise, lanes closed, traffic weaves. What goes must stop, but life must go on. Drivers tap thumbs on steering wheels, dashboards glow. Passing days, traffic comes and goes. Slogans of towns tell stories of parceled lands, remnant prairies, headstones, and family plots. Broken conversations yearn for more. Patches of earth torn, tall grasses dance with winds. Stars explode. Remnants we see, early light bleeds. Revelations of countryside, wildflowers open eyes.
Excellent poem. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was Mike Bales with Ghosting Broken Highways. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
See you later.
Yep, bye. Mike Bales, and let's see. Then we're going to go to Carla Schwartz next, and then Richard Westheimer. I do believe that is, that'll close out the show. So hopefully Richard's still here, and Carla Schwartz is here. Maybe I can read a few poems at the last for other people too.
Hello.
Hey, Carla, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty well, thank you. It's been a great evening, so I won't even ask how you're doing.
Yeah, it has been a good one. Yeah, it definitely has. So what do you have that you want to share?
So I actually have two haiku-like poems too.
Excellent. Lots of people inspired by Debbie, I think.
Yeah, and this is not my normal thing, but I tried. And the first one was actually a Poets Respond poem. I put them both on the same piece of paper.
Yeah, I see them here. Yeah.
Okay, and so the first one was in response to the NPR story that came out this week about the potential for that pipeline burst to be due to a boat. A ship dragging its anchor along the pipeline and breaking it.
Oh,
and
is that why? Yeah.
So the name of this poem is called Oil Spill. Oh, you have the thing up there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Oil spill. Ship drags anchor. Sand, scales, feathers, oiled slick. Seabirds dive for fish.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, great haiku. Oil spill, and again, no articles. Yeah, good combo.
Right.
There.
So, and both of them are in that vein. So the next one is also it's actually kind of an autumn poem, and it's called Overnight and After. Without internet, dreams fly, pink fog at dawn.
Oh, I love that. That's a good one too. That feels like Poets Respond a little bit with the whole Facebook down this week, which we got a bunch of poems for too.
Oh, I just want to say that I had no idea it was down because I was out having fun.
Well, that is the best way to be, for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing those, Carla, and always a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care, Tim.
Yep, you too.
Bye.
Bye. So Carla Schwartz with 2 haiku. And let's call up next Richard Westheimer. Let me gotta find him. It's getting a little messy toward the end of the. Where did he go? There he is. Hello, Richard. How you doing tonight?
Hey, Tim. Wow, you had a full evening, haven't you?
I have. It's great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this for months because Mark's one of my favorite poets. His books are just wonderful. So if anybody has had any doubt about buying copies of those, please do because they're good.
Yeah, I have a poetry group that we don't workshop poems. We poetics, and
Oh,
I
that's
think
cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think our next book might be that one that
the essays.
I'm circulating, sort of like the Amazon look inside pages to people after this to see what they think.
Oh, very cool. So what do you want to share with us tonight?
Oh, I think despite the fact that I loved the prompt, it just took me in places I never expected. Like you have to make choices, and it just makes the poem steer in a different direction. But I'm going to read my poets respond, mostly because Mark talked about tonight about not being a hermit, and this poem is about being a hermit.
Is this the blackberry? No time for blackberries?
No, that was the prompt poem.
Okay, let me pull this up then.
Here near the big city, I suffer from island dwarfing.
Okay, let me pull it up really quick.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no problem. I just I didn't have it ready.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Incidentally, I see two of you on my screen. It's like I see me and then you and then you.
Well, that's weird. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. Twice the Tim.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess that's probably too much, but that's okay.
Incidentally, that Emma Hoff poem that you posted yesterday, that was one of the most stunning wake up in the morning poems, and listening to her read it, it was just...
Yeah, she had a great reading of it, too. If anybody didn't listen to yesterday's poem by Emma Hoff, an 8-year-old from London, or England, I assume. Why is this? Okay. There, because it just wasn't loading. It's good now, though. Submittable wasn't loading for some reason, but it's on now.
Okay. Real quick, the background. There was a new dinosaur discovered. They called it Pendragon, which means chief dragon. And it was like a little tiny dinosaur on an island. And they explained the tininess by something called island dwarfing, which is when there's limited resources and few predators, things just don't grow large.
Yeah.
So this is, so I won't read the epigraph. Here near the big city, I suffer from island dwarfing. A little dragon of aloneness tags along with me around this small island of mine. She scrabbles the soil nearby in my garden where I pull weeds, as she snuffles around for buried creatures, worms and voles mostly, but other things too. Evenings, she sometimes settles to rest on the edge of my writing desk, her taloned feet occasionally batting at my black wing as I scratch lines onto a page. She and I are content here to thrive a little, but not so much that we outgrow what is supplied on this land. Grubs and little lizards for her, a bit of dirt to work for me, but not many visitors, too few to admire my fall blossoming ruby moons and the blue sky morning glories that twine up the trellis by my front door. There's no one to see the spent corn stalks I've carefully arranged and leaned up against the bell pull, or even an infrequent companion to walk in the woods with me. I don't perceive this aloneness as loneliness, though, just as the little dragon doesn't know that she fails to grow as large as her raptor cousins. She's unaware our island lacks the variety she'd require for that. I wonder, though, do I grow small, too, having settled in like a hermit this past year, without my friends to feed me stories, no traveling from this place to the mountains or to see my children, just me here writing from my small island in the company of a little dragon.
Yeah, very cool poem, Richard. I kind of, it was one of those ones that I could definitely relate to, because I feel like I'd love to be on my own little island myself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Richard.
Okay, thanks, Tim. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep, good night, Dick.
Bye.
Okay, so it was here near the big city, I suffer from island dwarfing. And let's see, so I was going to do this, I almost forgot. I was going to play this. I'm just kind of curious what this was. I was about to play it before we went live with Mark Jarman. And this is a This Week 4 years ago poem by Dorianne Laux. And let's see what this actually is, because it's only a minute and 49 seconds to play. But we'll read the description from Dorianne. She says, I wrote this poem after reading what Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told reporters at the United Nations last week. We have to calm down. the hot heads, we continue to strive for the reasonable and not emotional approach of the kindergarten fight between the children. So this was October 1st, 2017. And the story was, U.S. challenged by rising North Korea tensions. Russia urges calm. Remember that? Like, remember when North Korea was like the big news thing? Yeah, with the rockets and stuff. And there was that one fired over, or the false alarm that one was fired toward Hawaii, I think it was. Anyway, this is Dorianne Lux's poem that has to do with that. Let me just get it set up and we'll play it. Turn on the volume first so I don't blast you by accident. Here we go. This is Dorianne Laux.
If it's the last thing I do, this green-lit world in autumn, falling to red, to rust, Midas touched, as fuses are torched and rockets flare into blue over the Pacific. Two grown men squaring off in the schoolyard, too stupid to fear, too numbed by power to feel the air riding over the bare skin of their soft hands. Not a lick of a good day's work between them. TV host of sleepless nights, childhood's parents fighting in the kitchen, someone throwing a pot of gold against a wall. Equal as all get out and giving in to their lesser angels, those seraphim that tumbled through clouds of coal ash and acid rain and landed on their feet, miraculously unscathed, but with an unworldly ability to hate. Of late, the trees are turning skeletal in preparation for the shivery winter. Pall of snow laid down on the earth like a funeral cloth. We may not live to see another spring, another yellow summer, another flood, another famine, another war. Maybe this is that time when we wish them dead, our parents. Go ahead, we thought, as we lay in our beds. Just get it over with and do what you keep promising with a raised fist will be the last goddamn thing you ever do.
And once again, that was Dorianne Laux with If It's the Last Thing I Do. A great poem in response to the tensions between the U.S. and North Korea 4 years ago. It's so fascinating to look at these old poems because I don't remember them at all. And then as soon as they start, then it all comes rushing back and I remember it all, which is what great poems do. So thanks for sharing that, Dorianne. And now I think we're just going to quickly go to my SciKu. And the SciKu this week, if I can find it, was based on this story right here. This is from, here we go. This is from Florida State University. They did some research about how well the details and the vividness of your memory were affected by the sense of purpose that you had in life. So what they did is just they happened to give out these surveys and start this study right before the pandemic. And they gave these surveys that showed how much a sense of meaning and purpose you have in your life. And then they, after sort of the, 6 months later, this was like January 2020. And then so after that, they asked them to follow up and describe their experience during the pandemic. And they found this correlation between how vivid and detailed the memories were of the pandemic time versus a sense of meaning you have, which reminds me of, oops, I'm supposed to be showing this as I talk, but reminds me of, there's studies about people in elder care homes. Now, if they have some kind of pet to take care of, even if it's like a goldfish or something, that they will have a greatly improved cognitive functioning based on just that, just having some kind of purpose and meaning. Even if it's just to feed the goldfish once a day, it really helps. And so this is a confirmation of that research. And it was also a day yesterday where I was doing a lot of baseball stuff with my son. We have Little League and I coach his team. And we watched The Sandlot too. So I was just thinking about, being a kid that age and the vividness of that and how much meaning it had to be playing baseball at age 7 or whatever. And this was the SciKu, and I put it in a little haiga. So it's a saiga form, and it is right here. Fall baseball, our footprints fading in the dew. fall baseball, our footprints fading in the dew. That is your SciKu for today. And the prompt for next week is right here. Write a poem in second person. One of the most famous poems written in the second person is Wild Geese by Mary Oliver as an example. So check that out if you want. Or there's a lot of examples in Rattle too, but the theme is to write a poem in the second person. So it's pretty easy. A you poem, as we think of them. And that is your prompt for next week. And your guest for next week is Joseph Fasano. Another just wonderful guest. We've really been having good guests lately. Well, the whole time, 114 good guests. But Joseph Fasano is one of the early winners. I think the winner of the third or maybe second Rattle Poetry Prize for his poem Mahler in New York. He's since been the author of 4 books of poetry and a novel that just recently came out. The Crossing is his most recent book of poetry. He is one of the most elegant and musical poets writing today, I think. It's just pleasure just to the ear listening to him write and read. And that's going to be Joseph Fasano, Rattlecast number 114. The regular time, Sunday, October 17th, 1 week from right now, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great week. And thanks again for being a great audience. And I love it all the time. So thanks so much for being here. Hope you have a good week. See you soon.